It is often stated that the patricians were the ruling class in ancient Rome. But as you'll find out, this description is somewhat misleading. In this video, I look at the origins of the patrician families in ancient Rome and their mostly complex relationship with the plebeians. I welcome you to my YouTube channel where I explore ancient texts, and ancient text here I mean texts that have been around for thousands of years. At the moment, I'm going through from the founding of the city by Titus Livius or Livy. This is a collection of books written about 2000 years ago. It covers the history of Rome from the founding of the city by Romulus in 750 BCE to the time that Augustus was the emperor, which was close to 0 AD. If you have not subscribed, subscribe so that you do not miss any of the videos I publish. The simple, widespread understanding is that the patricians were the ruling class in ancient Rome and the plebeians, the commons, were the ruled. But when you read Livy's books, it becomes apparent that things were a little bit more complex than that. Throughout the period Livy chronicles in the history of Rome, the patricians and the plebeians were almost always feuding over political power, except when the city was at war with its neighbors. These intestinal fights, as Livy describes them, often included physical violence. And many times they made the city vulnerable to its enemies, especially when the plebeians blackmailed the patricians by refusing to enlist in the army. Many times, the plebeians, through their representatives, the tribunes of the people, made allegations that many of the wars Rome was fighting were instigated by the patricians as a way to distract them, the plebeians, from agitating for new laws and political rights. Livy tends to agree with this argument. For example, after one Caius Cornelius proposed laws in 440s BCE that will make it legal to intermarry between patricians and plebeians, and also open up the office of the consul to plebeians, a war broke out with the people of Ardea. This is what Livy writes about that. The Senate was not sorry to hear that Ardea had revolted as a consequence of the unjust decision about the territory, that the Veientine had ravaged the districts on the Roman frontier, and that the Volscians and Aquae were protesting against the fortifying of Verugo. So much did they, the patricians, prefer war, even when unsuccessful, to an ignominious peace. These class wars between the patricians and the plebeians are often called the conflicts of the orders or the struggle of the orders. The word order here is used to mean social class. But where did the patrician families come from, and what exactly made them stand out? It is important to note that, as I mentioned in my previous video, the patricians shared ancestry with the rest of the Romans in almost every way. There was nothing really special about their pedigree or ethnic origin. Just like some patrician families trace their origin to the Latin tribe, so did some plebeians. Many patrician and plebeian families trace their origin to other ethnic groups. For example, Appius Claudius came from the Sabine to become a senator and a consul. His family influenced the politics of Rome for centuries. Meanwhile, Appius Erdonius, the man who led the first slave uprising in Rome in 460 BCE, was also of a Sabine ethnic origin. Indeed, a slave belonged to a lower class than a plebeian. Despite the patricians having nothing special in their genealogy that differentiated them from the rest of the Romans, they over time separated themselves politically, economically, and socially. They considered the plebeians the lowest of the free people. They forcefully opposed any law that would make it legal for plebeians and patricians to intermarry. They viewed marriage with the plebeians as contaminating their, quote, pure blood, end of quote. Now let's answer the question of where they came from, or how they ended up being patricians. When Romulus founded Rome, one of the first actions that Livy describes him doing was appointing 100 individuals from his followers to serve as senators. Their main responsibility was to help him with creating laws and making decisions for the state. It is safe to assume that Romulus picked the most reliable individuals he could find for this purpose. It either became an honor conferred to their families, or due to the lack of the mechanism to replace them, they held the offices for life, and when they passed on, their children inherited the seats. In that way, the office of the senator became hereditary, and those families that held the office became the patrician families. Some of the kings who came after Romulus did add to the number of senators. For example, Lucius Tarquinius Priscus appointed 100 more senators, who came to be known as the senators of the lesser families. Most of these appointees by Lucius Tarquinius Priscus were Etruscans who had followed him to Rome. He was a Greek himself who was born and brought up among the Etruscans. Some had been captured in war and brought to Rome. Were the patricians the exclusive ruling class? Initially, yes, but as the state evolved, that changed. Before the first secession of the people, not long after the king was exiled, the patricians held all the power. They made all the decisions at the Senate, and the consuls were appointed from among them. After the secession in 494 BCE, in which all the plebeians left the city and moved to the sacred mount nearby to protest mistreatment, the Patricians' control over political power started to erode. Initially, this was as a concession to the end of the secession. First, the people got the power to enact laws through public assemblies. The public assembly also became the top court of law or Supreme Court, where final appeals were decided. Second, the Senate allowed for the commons to have the tribunes of the people. The tribunes of the people were the representative of the people, but more importantly, they served as the magistrates who protected the rights of the people. Initially, the Patricians controlled who was elected to be the tribune of the people. However, after the passage of the Bublian law in the 460s BCE, the commons started to directly elect the tribunes of the people. Over time, their voice grew. It became a common thing for the tribunes of the people to impeach consuls and punish them through fines, prison time, and even death. At some point, the people pushed to have the consuls elected from both classes. The Patricians conceded by letting plebeians have the office of the consular tribunes. These were individuals with military authority over the state. Later on, a plebeian could be elected consul. Livy does mention Lucius Sextius as the first plebeian consul. Now, when you read Livy's books, you get the impression that at some point, some plebeian families had had as much political, economic, and social clout as some of the patrician families. So it largely over time turned out that these two groups became some sort of political parties and not really the rulers and the ruled. But what remains throughout the history of ancient Rome is that the majority of Romans identified as plebeians, and only a few in the positions of authority identify themselves as plebeians. If you enjoyed this video, take a moment to strike the like button. I also welcome your comments. See you in the next video.